Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we are taking on one of the most uh, delightful and surprisingly rigorous engineering challenges of the holiday season.
We are.
We're moving past those flimsy, prefabricated kits to build a sturdy, beautiful, and completely edible gingerbread house from scratch.
It's such a fantastic tradition, and it goes back, what, 500 years? To Germany, I think.
That's right.
But our source material shows that the modern way of doing it is, well, it's anything but traditional baking.
Right. So for this deep dive, our mission was pretty clear. We went through a ton of expert recipes, a bunch of construction guides, and tried to synthesize all that wisdom into a foolproof strategy for you to build your dream house.
And we really need a strategy because of that central, agonizing question everyone has.
Why did my house collapse?
Exactly. A delicious gingerbread cookie recipe, the kind that's soft and chewy, is just fundamentally not going to work for architecture.
It's just not built for it.
Not at all. If you use that standard recipe, your walls are going to spread and puff up in the oven, and then the whole thing just collapses under its own weight.
Yeah.
If you want architecture, you need, well, a specialized structural dough.
Okay, let's get into that. Let's unpack the structural science here, starting with the blueprint. Engineering the perfect panel. Our sources seem to break the dough strategy into two distinct paths. You've got sort of the taste first approach and then the structure first approach.
That's a great way to put it. The first path is all about preserving that great flavor. It often starts with a really nice, well-spiced, honey-based dough. It's for the builder who absolutely insists on eating their creation later.
Which is most of us, I think. So if we start with that delicious but softer dough, what's the single most critical adjustment we have to make to stop it from spreading everywhere?
You have to dramatically, and I mean dramatically, reduce the leavening agent.
So the baking soda.
The baking soda. Leavening is what creates that CO2 gas and makes things puff up. In a normal cookie recipe, you might use a whole teaspoon.
Right.
For a 3D house, the consensus from bakers like Haniela's is to drop that all the way down to just an eighth or maybe a quarter of a teaspoon at most.
Whoa, wait. If we cut the baking soda that much, isn't the dough just going to taste like a brick? How do you balance that?
Well, that's the genius of using a honey-based dough. The honey and all those spices, they carry the flavor load, so you don't really miss the lift from the baking soda.
Ah, okay.
The goal isn't that soft, spongy texture anymore. The goal is stability. That tiny bit of baking soda that's left just helps with color and a little flavor depth, but it doesn't produce enough gas to warp your cuts.
That is such a key takeaway. It's so counterintuitive. But what about that second path, the one that's all about strength, the construction-grade gingerbread?
These recipes are engineered purely for building. Think of the ones from Sally's Baking or Sugar Spun Run. This approach often means you sacrifice a little richness for a lot of stability.
And the key difference here is the fat content, right?
Yeah, it's all about the fat.
So explain that. Why is too much butter a bad thing for a house?
Butter melts and spreads when it gets hot. So if your dough has a lot of fat in it, it just relaxes and kind of liquefies in the oven. That's why cookies are soft and chewy.
Which is great for a cookie, terrible for a wall.
Terrible for a wall. For structure, you need to minimize that spread. So these builders use less butter, sometimes less molasses, and they often just skip the baking powder soda entirely.
And the result is?
The result is a much drier, harder piece of gingerbread that holds its shape perfectly during the bake. It's incredibly stable.
So if you're building some elaborate multi-story mansion, you go with the low-fat, no-leavening dough. But if you're building a cozy little cottage you plan to eat on Christmas morning, you pick the honey dough with just that tiny pinch of baking soda.
Exactly. You choose your mission, then you choose your dough.
Okay, so once the dough is mixed, handling it is just as critical. The sources have a great hack for rolling and cutting those big wall and roof panels. What's the secret?
Consistency and thickness. That is king. You need an even quarter-inch thickness for all your panels. The bakers all say that if you roll the pieces too thin, especially the roof, they just become too weak and they'll collapse.
And here's the tip that I think saves everyone from disaster. Getting those big raw panels onto the baking tray.
This is the genius move. You see it again and again. To handle those big, fragile cutouts without stretching them, you have to roll the dough between two sheets of parchment paper.
Okay.
Then you cut your pieces right on the bottom sheet of parchment, peel away the scraps, and then you just slide the whole sheet onto the baking tray. You never even touch the actual cutout shape.
Ah, so you avoid that moment where you try to lift it and it just stretches out of shape.
That's where the deformation happens.
Yeah.
This prevents what one source called the wonky walls.
I love that. Okay, baking nuances. Do we just throw all the pieces in the oven at the same time?
You should not. You're juggling different timings. Your large wall panels might need, say, 10 to 14 minutes to get really firm. But the smaller details, like chimney pieces, they cook way faster, sometimes in just 5 to 7 minutes. The key is just to pull them out when they're firm enough, but not burnt.
And once they're out of the oven, the cooling process is something people probably overlook, but it's vital.
Oh, it's the difference between success and pure frustration. The single most important thing is to let them cool completely on a perfectly flat surface.
Not a wire rack.
Definitely not a wire rack, unless you know for sure it's perfectly flat. If it has any curve, or if you prop them up wrong, the edges of your pieces will curl up or warp, and when you try to assemble pieces with warped edges,
The walls won't meet up. The whole thing's unstable.
it's a nightmare.
All right, so we've baked our perfect, flat, sturdy panels. Now we need the cement. Let's talk adhesives. What are our options for glue, and why is one the undisputed champion?
Well, the sources mentioned 3, but really only 2 are for structure: royal icing and melted sugar, or caramel.
And third.
Melted chocolate. It's fine for, sticking a gumdrop to the roof, but it's way too soft to hold a wall.
Okay, so let's start with the fast method. The caramel glue. I can see the appeal for the impatient builder.
It provides an instant, incredibly strong bond. It is effective, but it has some serious downsides. First, it's temperamental. It hardens almost the second it touches the cool gingerbread.
So no room for error.
None. If you place a wall crooked, it is stuck that way forever. There's no adjusting.
And the safety warnings on this are pretty intense.
They need to be. Melted caramel is dangerously hot. We're talking temperatures that cause severe instant burns.
Wow.
One source actually suggests wearing rubber washing-up gloves to protect your hands, and it absolutely requires adult supervision and probably a helper. It's really only for people who value speed over safety and have worked with molten sugar before.
That sounds like a trade-off most of us should probably avoid, especially if there are kids around. So that brings us to the preferred method, royal icing.
Royal icing is the gold standard. It's what one source describes as drying super hard like cement. It's the structural backbone of the house, but only if you get the consistency right.
And what is that perfect consistency?
It needs to be thick, like a real glue-like consistency. Think peanut butter, not molasses.
Okay.
If it's too runny, the house will just collapse.
Yeah.
If it's too thick, you can't pipe it cleanly. You want it stiff enough to hold its shape, but still workable enough to create a strong seal.
And the big trade-off here is patience, right? It gives you forgiveness, but it demands time.
It really does. Its initial softness is great because you can make little adjustments as you're setting the walls. But it takes a long time to cure. You have to factor in waiting 6 to 8 hours, sometimes even up to 12 hours, for it to fully dry.
12 hours. That's a deal breaker for my holiday schedule. Is there any way to speed that up?
You are generally forced to wait. The whole structure of royal icing relies on the air drying of meringue powder or egg whites. You could use a dehumidifier, I suppose, but rushing it fundamentally compromises the bond.
So the minute you put that heavy roof on walls that aren't fully set,
You risk a disastrous domino effect. All the experts agree. Patience is non-negotiable here.
and just to be clear, why can't we just cheat with some easy store-bought frosting? Why are buttercreams a no-go?
It's just the chemistry of moisture. Those icings never fully harden, they stay soft, and that moisture can actually start to soften the gingerbread itself. It almost always leads to collapse. You need that absolute cement-like quality that only dried royal icing gives you.
Got it. So we have our panels, we have our cement. Now for the fun part, construction and decoration. What's the universal assembly process?
It's pretty tactical. The consensus is you start with the front panel, then you add the 2 side walls one at a time with a really clean bead of icing at the seams.
Okay.
Then you attach the back piece to complete the 4-wall base.
That seems straightforward, but the most important step here is letting it set for a while, isn't it?
Absolutely critical. Once you have that box shape, you must let that base dry for at least an hour. If you rush it, the weight of the roof will just push the walls outward and the whole thing collapses.
Okay, speaking of the roof, that's always the trickiest part. Gravity is not your friend here. Is there a universal roof support hack to keep those panels from sliding off?
There is, and if you forget it, you are pretty much guaranteed failure. The second you place those heavy roof panels, physics says they're going to slide right off before the icing sets.
Right.
The key is using temporary internal supports.
What kind of supports are we talking about?
Small cans, water bottles, jars,
Mm-hmm.
anything you can place inside the house to hold the roof panels up from underneath. It's a temporary brace that you leave in until the icing is totally cured.
Which could be hours.
It could be 6, 12 hours. You can even use spare gingerbread scraps cut into wedges to brace the peat from the inside. The supports stay until that icing is rock hard.
That saves a lot of frustration.
Hmm.
Okay, once the house is sound, decoration strategy. Do we decorate the panels before we build or after?
It's a real trade-off, and it depends on your design. If you're planning on really intricate piped royal icing designs, like shingles or lace trim, it is so much easier to do that while the panels are lying flat on the table.
So decorate first, then assemble.
Exactly.
But if you have kids involved, or you're just planning to cover it in candy...
You absolutely assemble the house first. If you're using bigger candies or if you have little helpers, it's much easier to work on the standing structure. They can just use the icing to glue decorations on, which has the bonus effect of strengthening any weak seams.
Let's get into some of the most creative tips our sources gave us, starting with that amazing stained glass window effect. How do you pull that off?
This is such a great hack. Before you bake, you cut out your window shapes. Then you fill the holes with crushed hard candies. Jolly Ranchers or butterscotch candies work really well.
Okay.
And, crucially, you should do this on a silicone mat, not parchment paper.
Oh, why the silicone mat?
Because the melted sugar gets incredibly sticky. If it melts onto parchment, it often sticks and tears when you try to move it. On a silicone mat, the melted candy just pops right off cleanly once it cools.
And as it bakes, the candy just melts into
And
it.
a beautiful translucent window.
That's amazing. And the illumination.
You just add a little battery-operated tea light inside the finished house. With those stained glass windows, it creates this gorgeous glowing effect. It really turns it into a centerpiece.
And what about that classic freshly fallen snow look? How do you hide the seams?
The best way is to use plenty of thick royal icing to cover all the seams and corners. When it dries, that thick, uneven look naturally looks like drifted snow.
Simple.
And for that really fresh, powdery look, just use a fine mesh strainer to dust the roof with confectioner's sugar.
I like that.
Or, if you want more texture for snow on the ground, you can spread a thin layer of icing around the base and sprinkle shredded coconut on top before it dries. It gives a really fantastic snowdrift texture.
So after all this work, we have to ask the big question. How long does this edible architecture actually last?
That really depends on whether it's for display or for dessert. If you're just displaying it on a mantle for a few weeks, the gingerbread will get rock hard and stale, but it'll probably stay standing for a very long time.
And if we actually plan to eat it?
If you're going to eat it, you should aim to do it within 2 to 3 weeks of baking. And that's assuming the room isn't too humid. If it's humid, the moisture can start to break things down, and you should probably eat it within a day or two.
This deep dive has completely changed how I think about this. It's really a science, isn't it? It's blending engineering with baking.
It really is. We've figured out those key recipe tweaks, that critical eighth of a teaspoon of baking soda, or getting rid of the extra butter. We've learned the trade-offs between that instant caramel and the cement-like royal icing.
And we've got those indispensable construction hacks, like the parchment paper transfer to avoid wonky walls and the temporary roof supports that defy gravity. We've definitely moved beyond the flocky kits.
And that kind of leaves us with our final thought for you. We've really established the difference between delicious gingerbread and construction gingerbread, that dough that bakes super hard and doesn't spread.
Our sources pointed out that bakers are already using these techniques for really elaborate, non-traditional builds. Think edible Star Wars ships or detailed Harry Potter castles.
So now that you have these specialized, stable, structural dough techniques in your toolkit, we want to encourage you to think beyond just the simple cottage.
What other architectural feats, edible cathedrals, edible skyscrapers, maybe a detailed rendering of a landmark you love, what could you achieve with this knowledge?
The world of edible architecture is waiting for your next big project.
Until next time, keep digging deep.